STEMology, the Young Scientist Survival Guide, Session 13. Welcome back. You're listening to STEMology with Alina Adams. I'm glad to see you all returning each week to hear more and more from your STEM Survival Guide. Hopefully I've been checking all your boxes lately and delivering content that's important to you. Send me a message on any of my social media accounts. I'd love to hear your thoughts so far, and I'm very interested to know where all of you are in your academic careers and some short-term goals that you've set for yourself. So reach out, let's see what's going on in the community. As some of you might remember from my quick introduction last week, Emma Helm and I wanted to take some time and dive into all things shadowing. Thanks for speaking with me, Emma. It's great to see you, and I know with your experiences shadowing and the time that you've spent in healthcare, there has got to be some valuable insights you can offer to students, so it's really great that you're here.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me. I have definitely shadowed a few times, considering I'm a biology major, hopefully going to medical school soon. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, it's really great to be here.
Awesome. So why don't you formally introduce yourself to the audience here?
Yeah, so like you said, my name is Emma, and I am currently going to the University of Missouri, Kansas City, majoring in biology and minoring in chemistry. I'm really interested in going into medicine, and I am hopefully on the right trail to get there. I just took my MCAT, so
you are. I know, you just took your MCAT, and I'm so excited to see how that goes. But awesome. Thanks for giving up some time to talk about one of my favorite experiences to date in undergrad. Shadowing for me has been such an integral part of my growth.
It's an awesome experience for any field, not just medicine or whatever you might be thinking in your head. You can shadow anywhere.
Absolutely. And I want to make that pretty clear in this podcast, is that although Em and I are both pre-med and we have shadowed doctors, that doesn't mean that this episode is only for people interested in shadowing doctors. So if you're a business major and you want to get into accounting, we also suggest that these tools that we're about to give you would help you any other type of job that you're considering. So why don't we just start at the beginning?
To me, shadowing is essentially just going to a place where you can observe a professional doing their profession, whatever that may be. So personally, I have observed a lot of people in the healthcare field, like dentists, doctors, physical therapists. That has been a really good experience, but like we just said, it can really be any profession.
And a quick note is that when you're shadowing, don't expect to really be in there on the field doing all these crazy things, because you're basically just a fly on the wall.
Yep, I could not have said that better myself.
So your opinions don't really matter, at this point, you're just there to observe. Mm-hmm. The reason why shadowing matters to me for professional schools, I need to have some shadowing under my belt.
Yeah. So not only to have the experience of saying you went and shadowed, but to actually immerse yourself in what you will be doing on a day-to-day basis. You can't just expect to love something if you haven't tried it out before and you have no experience there.
Another way to say that is just exposure to the field. So you get some insight into the life of the professional that you're shadowing. So the workplace culture, what it may be like working for a similar employer in your future.
And you may learn something about that field, and even if you thought you knew everything, you definitely don't, and it'll be a great experience.
But we all know, at least from my experience, that shadowing is really hard to come by. Finding these opportunities is kind of a struggle to get your foot through the door, but after you get into it, it gets a lot easier. So what are some ways to get your foot through the door?
What's worked the best for me has definitely been calling people. Everybody really likes to see that initiative. I would say email is probably the next best thing, because some people do actually prefer email. I really like having a phone call just because you really establish that connection and they recognize your voice if you meet with them.
Another thing to do is to ask your primary care physician if they know of any clinics or anywhere that supports pre-medicine, pre-dental, pre-physician's assistant, pre-professional students in general. Usually your primary care physician has a great network of people, so it would never hurt to ask.
So you can also reach out to your advisors or other people such as your boss in a professional setting. A lot of them have connections outside of the workplace, includes any type of professional that can help you with your shadowing experience.
Exactly. Once you shadow that first time, you're able to reach out within that same hospital, in that same network, for a variety of experiences. Try to always be on your best behavior, I guess, because you never know who will give you an opportunity that you need to reach that next level or take that next step. Using your professors, who are almost bound to know other professionals across different fields.
Personally, I had a great experience reaching out to my advisor, just looking for a job, and with that job, I made a great connection with my boss, and she was able to set me up with a few physicians that I could shadow, and then those physicians gave me a few other physicians, and it was really just that big branching network. It was a really awesome experience, but it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't taken that leap and reached out. even though it wasn't originally me looking for a shadowing opportunity, it definitely became that because I essentially seized the moment and really looked at my options.
That's usually the most intimidating spot to be in, is to be like, hey, I need help. Like, what can you do for me?
It's hard.
Yeah, it is hard. But after you do it, you realize, oh, okay, that wasn't so bad. I should have done that like much sooner.
Agreed.
And after we talked about this the first time, I actually reached out to my advisor and I said, hey, I'm looking for a job. What do you think? She's like, oh, I got the perfect thing. So it really like doesn't hurt at all to just ask.
The worst thing they'll say is no.
But probably the most important things to remember is how to behave when you shadow. So my number one thing is to always try to have a good attitude, go in with a good energy, be enthusiastic, because even if you decide within the first 20 minutes that this career isn't for you and you lose just all interest immediately, it's important to keep a positive outlook and remain engaged, because overall this person is dedicating their time and their energy to you, so you need to appreciate it.
Exactly. And you might learn something not even related to healthcare, just from talking to whoever you're shadowing. And again, healthcare, using ourselves as an example. If you go shadow an accountant, like we said earlier, you might learn something that they've learned just in regular life, and that might be really helpful to you in the future. They may just have some really great tips.
Yeah, you're right. It doesn't even have to be job related. They could just have like, hey, when I was an undergrad, this is something that helped me, you know? So yeah, it doesn't even have to be profession related. I like that. Another piece of advice is to be inquisitive. Personally, I always show up with a list of questions for the person I'm shadowing, especially if it's a new position that I've never shadowed before and I don't really know much about. I know we said you should just be a fly on the wall, but you should also be interested and show that you are willing to put some energy into the position that you're shadowing.
If you're interested, the person you're shadowing will also probably be more interested. A lot of them will also have questions for you. I went and shadowed a physical therapist once, and he started drilling me with anatomy questions. Was I ready for that? No, but luckily I was in anatomy class, so I kind of was.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's happened to me too before. Usually it wasn't, science-based questions, but they do ask you, hey, why do you even want to do this? Why are you interested? Where are you going with this career? Am I wasting my time on you? So go prepared, ready to answer questions like that, because you're almost bound to get them. I don't know any situation where whoever you're shadowing just wouldn't care about who's shadowing them.
People might be having bad days, so sometimes you may need to make up for the energy and show them that you are really enthusiastic to be there and you do really, really care to be there, because that may help brighten their day, knowing that somebody's really interested in their profession and what they do.
Sometimes we forget what it's like to be shadowed. I know at this age, none of us have really had a shadow before, but you kind of need to put yourself in their shoes too. Would you want someone shadowing you who asks maybe questions that aren't very smart, or someone who is really in your personal space?
On top of that though, don't ask questions that are completely irrelevant for the sake of asking a question.
Exactly.
Make sure that they are appropriate.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Along with asking appropriate questions, make sure you're asking questions at the appropriate times, because there are definitely good times to be inquisitive and there are definitely bad times to be inquisitive. So make sure you're kind of reading the room, reading social cues, understanding what you should do when. And since we're already talking about what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, what are some things that you should wear to your shadowing experience?
I've had the option to wear either scrubs, but usually in my experience it turns out to be business casual. Depending on the setting, again, this is just me speaking on a healthcare setting, some places may prefer business professional. There's a different range, but the best thing to do, I found out, is just to reach out to whoever you've contacted to set up the shadowing and ask them what's appropriate to wear, because they will definitely know, and that's better than just guessing.
Exactly, that's a good point, is that you should always go back to who you scheduled with if you have any questions. Every place has different standards.
Try not to pack too heavy or too many things, because a lot of places you'll just set your things down, you won't be carrying them with you. You want to be prepared, but you don't want to be bagged down and have a lot of stuff to worry about. But
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, with that, definitely bring a jacket if you get cold easily, and make sure you're bringing other essentials that you may need.
Like a hair tie?
Yeah, like a hair tie. Definitely a hair tie.
I've gotten caught up with that one a couple of times. Some other things to bring would be a notebook. notebook. I always brought a notebook because it's always better for me to just immediately write down what I'm seeing, what I'm experiencing, any answers to some questions that I had, just an overall look of the day, so that it's very easy for me to go back and remember, especially on those longer shadowing days. The shortest shadowing day that I've ever had was 12 hours. Being able to write down what I'm doing as I'm doing it was crazy beneficial for filling out my applications.
My shortest shadowing days were probably half days in some of those professions that I was kind of interested in but not 100% set on. For those, I made an Excel spreadsheet and would just write down important things I learned afterwards. I will say it's important to make sure that you communicate with the person that you're shadowing and make sure they're okay with you writing things down, because some people might be a little iffy about that, and it's better to be safe than sorry.
But honestly, you probably just need to bring yourself. Like, it might be beneficial to have a bag for your phone and keys, maybe some cash, but if you can, try to keep it very minimal because you don't know what's going to be asked of you. Like Emma said, you don't want to be bogged down all day long.
So we did mention bringing a bag to put your phone into, but another thing with the phones is to make sure that they are off or at least turned on to silent if you're expecting an important phone call. But the best rule of thumb is just to leave it somewhere where you won't be distracted by it, because it's definitely rude to pull out your phone in the middle of a shadowing day when you are supposed to be observing someone that took the time from their day to teach you. So imagine if you were in their shoes, how you would feel about that. And
this is supposed to be a day of observership, and you're not supposed to be observing your tweets or Instagram timeline.
Exactly.
This is about, your education and furthering that to get the most out of the experience.
You'll have to do it when you're working, so
Exactly.
may as well practice now.
Exactly. That's something I forget about. It's like when you are actually a doctor, you won't be on your phone all day. But overall, there are differences between good shadowing days and bad shadowing days. Emma already kind of touched on that. Maybe the person that you're shadowing is having a bad day, but overall, all shadowing is good shadowing.
Definitely. And like we talked about earlier, there's always an experience that you can take away from. Even if you have the worst possible shadowing experience you can think of, you can't walk away without having learned something.
Exactly. Even if it's what not to do.
Exactly. Exactly.
I mean, as long as you're reaching your end goals, as long as you're getting what you came to get out of the experience, I think you're pretty golden. But outside of general experience and exposure to healthcare, you want to be able to network with current students, the physician themselves, or whomever you're shadowing, an engineer or a mathematician. You want to be able to maybe ask for a letter of recommendation at the end of the day.
Yeah, especially with the letters of recommendation. I actually made a really good connection with one of the physicians that I shadowed, and the field she was in, I wasn't really interested before shadowing her. I just took a shot and said, let's try it out. And I ended up loving it, and I never thought I would. But here we are, and she's writing me a wonderful letter of recommendation that I am very, very thankful for.
A few overall tips that we had, we kind of already touched on them, but just a recap. The first one is about miscommunication. So that ultimately reflects badly on you. So make sure you have all the details planned out beforehand.
Definitely. If you take some time to look into the place that you're shadowing or organization, it will help you out a lot. Being able to initiate questions about the organization or simply know a few things will pleasantly surprise most of the people you're shadowing.
There are even little details that you might need to know beforehand, like where to park, or if you need a parking pass or validation, or things like that, and where to go once you arrive. A lot of buildings, hospitals I'm talking about, have multiple entrances, so you need to know which one to go through, what time to be there, because being late is probably the worst first impression. And like Emma said, you don't want to be caught off guard at all, and researching beforehand is an excellent way to make sure that that doesn't happen. And my last piece of advice was to be prepared to answer questions about yourself and why you're interested in the job you're shadowing and what your prospective career path is and what brought you to that conclusion in general, because like we said before, they're going to want to know about you as well.
I'd also like to add on to reach out the different shadowing experiences. Personally, I'm interested in becoming a physician. I would also say to try out other professions that you are kind of interested in, kind of in the same field that you want to go into, but maybe not quite the thing you have your heart set on, just to either confirm that what you want to do is what you want to do, or maybe learn about something new and try out something new.
So I thought we would take these last couple minutes and just talk about our favorite experiences shadowing, some things that kind of stuck in your mind as maybe a turning point for you, maybe when you decided not to become a certain type of physician, or when you decided that something worked out better than something else.
I went and shadowed a primary care physician, and at first I wasn't 100% sold on going into primary care just because I like the idea of specializing in something. At the time, I was really interested in oncology, but whenever I went and shadowed her, it was a really, really great experience. We could talk about our interests outside of the healthcare field, and it was a really great experience for me because I learned that even if I don't go into primary care, that I could emulate her as a doctor and that I could use the skills that she taught me to communicate with patients or simply to speak to families of patients, anything like that.
That's awesome. That sounds like a really good, well-rounded experience. For me, I had always wanted to be a surgeon, so I'd always wanted to, be in the OR, scrubbed in, ready to work. I always saw myself more as a sports medicine doctor just because I had always been around sports. I'd played sports for the last almost 20 years, so it's always been like a huge part of my life, so I wanted to keep going forward with that when I went into medicine. And the first doctor I ever shadowed took me into the ER, and she was a trauma surgeon, and she just told me about all of the different cases that you get to see. So as an orthopedic surgeon, you probably specialize in 1, 2, 3 major surgeries that you just perform over and over again. You get really good at like those 3 surgeries, but as a trauma surgeon, you have to be really good at everything because you have to be prepared for whatever comes in. Exactly. It's a lot harder, but I was just like kind of mind blown about it because I hadn't thought about every day could be an adventure. You never know what to expect, but you're always prepared. And I really like that mindset of just going into work and being able to be surprised.
Yeah,
I guess.
That's awesome. You're always on your toes.
Yeah, and so it could be scary. I mean, not knowing what to expect that day, not knowing what information you'll have to pull out of your brain, but I think it'd be really interesting. So in this episode, Em and I quickly reviewed shadowing. Whether it's your first time or your 20th time, it's important to keep the basics in mind. In the next episode of Stemology, you all will finally get to meet my mentor and the person that supervised my work over the last year as I worked on the Sanger syndrome project during my internship at Biomed Valley of Discoveries. His name is Dr. David Tu. We will start at the beginning and we will discuss exactly what the mentor-mentee relationship consists of, its importance in your journey, and give some tips for finding your own counterpart. Hopefully Emma and I were able to answer some pressing questions about shadowing that might have crossed your mind. And if you like what you heard, go ahead and share and subscribe. I'm sure your friends would like the same information that you were given. And as always, you can send in all questions and comments to me anytime at stemologyssg@gmail.com. And you can contact me from our Facebook page, Instagram at the Stemology Podcast, or on Twitter at stemologyssg. Thank you for listening to our 13th episode of Stemology, a young scientist survival guide. Tune in with me, Alina Adams, for episode 14, Mentors. See you next time.